At 35,000 feet, the sky doesn't forgive mistakes. You're sitting comfortably, seatbelt loose, coffee in hand. The engines sound normal. Everything feels safe. Now imagine this. You look out the window, and a fighter jet is flying beside your plane. Not far, not escort distance, close enough to see the pilot's helmet. Your heart skips. People around you start whispering. Someone laughs nervously. Someone else records on their phone. The flight attendant freezes for just a second too long. Then the captain speaks. Not calmly, carefully. Outside, another jet appears. This isn't a show. This isn't training. And then you notice him. A man sitting quietly by the window. No fear. No reaction. While everyone else panics, he simply listens. His phone vibrates. 2 words crackle through an unseen radio channel. Words civilians were never meant to hear. Iron first. If you knew what that meant, your blood would run cold. Because iron first isn't a warning. It's permission. What happened next decided whether this flight would land or disappear into the sky forever. Stay with me, because this story proves something terrifying. Sometimes the most dangerous moment is when only one person understands what's really happening. At 35,000 feet, silence feels different. It isn't quiet. Engines still hum, air still moves, screens still glow, but there's a false sense of safety that wraps around passengers like a blanket. People believe nothing can touch them up here. The sky feels owned, controlled, predictable. The flight had been smooth since takeoff. A business traveler typed on his laptop, annoyed at weak Wi-Fi. A mother adjusted her child's blanket. A couple whispered about hotel check-in times. Coffee cups rattled softly as the aircraft cut through thin clouds. No one noticed the first sign. A faint vibration. Not turbulence. Not rough air. Something sharper. Near the window, a man sat alone. Broad shoulders. Thick beard. Baseball cap pulled low. He wore no uniform. No badge. Nothing that suggested importance. Just a dark t-shirt and the posture of someone used to sitting still for long periods of time. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't watching a movie. He was listening. When the shadow passed the window, a few passengers gasped. Someone pointed. Outside. Far too close. A fighter jet streaked past the glass, gray and angular, sunlight reflecting off its wings. Then another. The cabin filled with confusion. Is that normal? Why are they so close? Are we in danger? Phones came out. Photos snapped. Nervous laughter followed, the kind people use when fear hasn't fully arrived yet. The man by the window didn't move. His eyes tracked the aircraft calmly. His jaw tightened, not in panic, but in recognition. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently coordinating with air traffic control. Please remain seated. That word, coordinating, landed heavily. The engines sounded the same, but the air felt different now. Thicker, charged. A flight attendant walked past, forcing a smile that didn't quite hold. Her eyes flicked to the window, then away. The man slowly reached for his phone. No rush. No shaking hands. He brought it to his ear, listening, not dialing. Outside, the jets adjusted position. Closer. Tighter. This wasn't an escort. This was an assessment. The man exhaled slowly. He had seen this formation before. Not in movies. Not in training videos. In real operations, where mistakes meant fire. Around him, fear was growing. But inside him, only memory. And somewhere, beyond the cockpit, a radio channel opened. One that hadn't been used for civilians in a very long time. The pilots didn't announce it. There was no warning siren, no sharp banking turn, no sudden drop that would force screams from the cabin. Instead, the aircraft continued straight ahead, steady as if nothing extraordinary was happening at all. That was the most dangerous part. Inside the cockpit, voices were low, controlled, professional, every word chosen carefully, because every word was being recorded. Air traffic control confirms unidentified military presence, the co-pilot said, eyes locked on the instruments. The captain nodded once. His hands never left the controls. Then the radio crackled. Not the usual civilian frequency. Not the friendly, rehearsed tone of commercial aviation. This voice was clipped, direct. Military, civilian aircraft, maintain heading and speed. No call sign, no explanation. In the cabin, passengers leaned forward instinctively, as if being closer to the cockpit could give them answers. A man whispered a prayer. Someone else laughed nervously, pretending it was all exciting, something to tell friends later. The bearded man by the window finally spoke, not out loud, but into the phone pressed gently to his ear. He wasn't calling anyone. He was listening to a frequency that shouldn't have been active on a commercial flight. Outside, one of the F-35 slid closer, its nose aligning perfectly with the aircraft's wing. The precision was unsettling. This wasn't intimidation. It was control. The radio crackled again. Confirm response readiness. The captain hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. That's when the word came. 2 words. Low. Calm. Unmistakable. Iron first. The bearded man's eyes changed instantly. Not widened. Not panicked. Focused. Passengers didn't understand the phrase. To them, it sounded like jargon, meaningless military slang. But to someone who had lived inside classified briefings, it meant only one thing. This was no drill. Iron first was a contingency phrase, a silent trigger. It meant the situation had escalated beyond observation. Someone, somewhere, believed a threat was possible or imminent. The man lowered his phone. For the first time since boarding, he shifted in his seat. A flight attendant noticed and froze. People like her were trained to read fear. What unsettled her wasn't panic. It was the absence of it. The man leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the window. He recognized the formation now. The spacing. The angles. One jet ahead. One behind. A textbook containment pattern. This wasn't about the plane. It was about what, or who, might be on it. Inside the cockpit, the captain swallowed hard. Request clarification on iron first, he said, keeping his voice steady. The reply came instantly. Stand by. That was worse than any explanation. Because stand by in military language didn't mean wait. It meant prepare. The cabin lights flickered, just for a moment. Enough to turn whispers into silence. The bearded man closed his eyes briefly. Not in fear. In calculation. Whatever happened next would depend on timing, judgment, and whether someone on this aircraft understood what Iron First truly allowed. The man by the window finally stood. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just enough movement to break the invisible rule of stillness that had settled over the cabin. A few heads turned. Then more. People weren't watching him because he looked dangerous. They were watching because he looked certain. In moments of fear, certainty draws attention like gravity. He stepped into the aisle as the aircraft remained perfectly level. Sir, please remain seated, a flight attendant whispered, her voice tight. He gave her a brief nod. I will, he said calmly. In a moment. His voice carried no authority in tone, yet it carried weight. The kind that comes from having given orders when hesitation costs lives. He didn't move toward the cockpit. That would have caused panic. Instead, he stopped near the bulkhead, one hand resting lightly against the wall as the plane surged forward through thin air. His eyes stayed on the window, watching the F-35 slide back into position like a shadow. Memories surfaced, sharp, unwelcome. Desert heat, rotor wash, radio static soaked in urgency. He had worn a different uniform then, not this clean civilian disguise. Back when silence wasn't a personality trait, it was survival. A passenger whispered, "Who is that guy?" No one answered, because no one knew, except the man himself. He had learned long ago that rail operators don't announce their past. They let time bury it. He had served in units that didn't exist on paper, in operations that never made headlines. When people thanked soldiers, they weren't thanking him. And that was exactly how it was designed. The phone in his hand vibrated softly. One pulse, a coded acknowledgement. He lifted it to his ear again. This time, the voice on the other end was different. Respectful. Confirm identity, the voice said quietly. He didn't answer immediately. He glanced around the cabin, at the nervous faces, the confused children, the flight attendant gripping a seat for balance. None of them had signed up for what might come next. Identity confirmed, he said at last. No rank, no name. That was enough. On the other end of the line, there was a pause. Then, understood. In the cockpit, a message flashed across a secondary display, one the captain had never seen activated before. A system normally dormant on civilian aircraft, accessible only under extraordinary circumstances. The captain's breath caught. "What is happening?" the co-pilot asked. Before he could answer, the intercom chimed. But the captain didn't speak. The bearded man did. Not through the cabin speakers. Through a channel that bypassed them entirely. "Your pilots are doing their job," he said into the phone. "So are yours. Let's keep everyone alive." Outside, the jets adjusted again, but this time, the formation relaxed. Barely. Subtly. A shift only trained eyes would notice. The silent man lowered his phone. He exhaled slowly. The past had caught up with him at 35,000 feet. And this time, it wasn't staying silent. The aircraft shuddered. Not violently, but enough to remind everyone how thin the line between control and chaos truly was. In the cockpit, the captain wiped his palms against his uniform pants, careful not to let his hands leave the controls for more than a second. He had flown through storms, mechanical failures, even emergency landings, but never this. Never an invisible chess match being played around his aircraft. A new instruction came through the restricted channel. Possible hostile misidentification. Stand by for resolution. The words were clean, clinical, but the implication was terrifying. A misidentification at this altitude, with fighter jets this close, meant seconds, not minutes, separated safety from catastrophe. In the cabin, tension had become physical. People weren't talking anymore. They were listening, even though there was nothing to hear. The bearded man returned to his seat slowly. He buckled in, not because he was afraid, because he knew what might happen next. He studied the window again. One jet ahead, one behind, both holding just enough distance to react instantly. Their pilots weren't aggressive. They were cautious. That mattered. The phone vibrated again. "Your assessment," the voice asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he replayed the situation like a mental checklist. Flight path, altitude, behavior of the crew, passenger responses. Everything he'd learned over decades of controlled chaos. "There's no hostile on board," he said finally. "No diversion indicators. No panic signature. This is clean." Silence followed. "Then, we have conflicting data." He closed his eyes for half a second. Conflicting data killed people. He leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. "Then trust the human in the loop," he said, "not the algorithm." In the cockpit, an alert flashed, then vanished. The co-pilot stared at the screen. "Captain, did you see that?" Before he could answer, air traffic control broke in, this time on the normal civilian channel. "Flight confirmed status." The captain exhaled, relief flickering across his face for the first time. "Status normal," he replied. "Request continued escort." Outside, the F-35s shifted again, this time away. The tension didn't evaporate, it loosened, like a fist slowly unclenching. Passengers felt it without understanding why. Breaths deepened, shoulders dropped. Someone laughed softly, embarrassed by the sound. The bearded man remained still, because he knew better than to celebrate early. One final transmission came through his phone. Resolution accepted. Iron first, standing down. Those words carried weight. Standing down meant weapons, safeties engaged. Threat matrix cleared. Lives spared. He nodded once. "Good flying," he said. The line went dead. Minutes later, the captain's voice filled the cabin again, steadier now. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are continuing on our scheduled route." Applause broke out. Nervous at first, then real. People looked around, smiling at strangers, relieved without knowing why. No one clapped for the man by the window. He didn't need it. He looked outside one last time as the jets peeled away, disappearing into the blue. Somewhere below, the world kept moving, unaware how close it had come stopping. And somewhere inside the cabin, a silent veteran reminded the sky that experience still mattered. The rest of the flight passed without incident. No more radio interruptions. No sudden movements. Just the steady rhythm of cruising air and the soft glow of cabin lights returning to normal. For most passengers, the fear slowly transformed into a strange story they would later struggle to explain. There were fighter jets. I think. Something military happened. Unclear memories. Half-understood moments. But for a few, the crew, the pilots, and one silent man, the meaning was unmistakable. When the seatbelt sign finally switched off, the cabin exhaled. People stood, stretched, and reached for overhead bins as if routine could erase what had just brushed past them. Laughter returned, louder than before, trying to reclaim normalcy. The bearded man remained seated. A flight attendant approached cautiously, this time with genuine curiosity replacing fear. "Sir," she said softly, "are you military?" He looked up, meeting her eyes for a brief moment. He replied. "Nothing more." She nodded, sensing not to ask again. Up front, the captain hesitated before making an announcement. Protocol didn't require it. Regulations didn't demand it. But something deeper pushed him to act. He pressed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "before we begin descent, I'd like to thank an individual on board whose experience helped ensure our safe journey today." The cabin grew quiet. The captain paused. He didn't seek attention, and he didn't wear a uniform, he continued. "But sometimes, the people who protect us do so silently." Applause erupted. Not thunderous, not dramatic, respectful. People looked around, trying to identify the man. Some clapped without knowing who or why. Only that survival deserved gratitude. The bearded man did not stand. He didn't wave. He simply nodded once, eyes lowered. When the aircraft landed, the runway lights streaked past the windows like closing chapters. The tires touched down smoothly, the final proof that the sky had released them safely. As passengers disembarked, some glanced at him with curiosity, a few with recognition. One man stopped briefly. "Thank you," he said awkwardly, "for whatever you did." The bearded man offered a small smile. "Just listen," he replied. At the terminal, 2 uniformed officers stood near the gate. Not law enforcement, something quieter, more deliberate. They watched him approach. One nodded. No handshake, no salutes, just understanding. He walked past them and disappeared into the crowd, another traveler among thousands. By the next day, news outlets would speculate. Forums would argue. Videos would circulate, blurry and incomplete. People would guess, exaggerate, and invent. But the truth would remain simple. At 35,000 feet, when technology hesitated and systems conflicted, a human voice grounded in experience made the difference. No medals were awarded, no names recorded, and somewhere, deep inside the sky's invisible corridors, the phrase, "Iron First," would be logged. Not as a warning, but as a reminder that silence, when paired with wisdom, can save lives.